33 for me has been a very humbling year because I started noticing some very slow but progressive age-related changes with my face in particular that I am not appreciating. I really want to discuss the products and the skincare that I'm using to do my makeup now at 33, almost 34 years old, that have had to change even in the last year. I'm taking specific steps with my skincare to combat this volume loss through facial yoga, as I said, but also with my skincare. I prep my eyes in a very specific way because if I don't, I'd just be looking crazy. I look like I am a zombie from Michael Jackson's Thriller music video. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll go in with some eye patches mixed with my favorite eye serum at the moment. So I'm gonna take just a few drops of the Caudalie serum and I will very gently rub that into my under eyes. And then I'm literally just going to pop these eye patches from Grace and Stella right over that to let that really marinate onto my under eyes. So I've done my initial skin prep this morning. I washed my face, I applied my moisturizer, and I applied my dark spot correcting serum from Murad to address the hyperpigmentation on the rest of my face. Because I am starting to experience different textural changes with just the overall surface of my skin, I've noticed that I need to prep my skin even more after the fact with specific products that address hydration in particular to really get a flawless base for the rest of my makeup. So I've been using this PDRN serum from a Korean brand. I just take that and I press that into the areas where I have the most textural difficulties at this point. For me, that is going to be the lower region of my face, so my chin and around my mouth and the creases of my nose here and my smile lines. I just need to give them a little bit of extra TLC to make sure that they are looking their absolute best underneath the makeup. This is kind of slightly tacky, so this is going to be a really good base for getting makeup to stick in these regions very nicely. And I prefer to use a more substantial Korean-based skincare serum like this that is a little bit tacky to help makeup grip a little bit better, as opposed to grippy makeup primers because they don't really react the best with my skin. I find that if you need extra hydration, extra grippiness, Korean skincare is honestly the best bet. The last thing that I'm going to go in with is this Too Faced Hangover RX Replenishing Spray and Setting Spray. I like to go in with this because this has a little bit of that tacky sort of sticky feel to it, but not overly so, and it does provide a nice grippy sort of texture for the rest of my makeup and also adds a little bit more hydration and a little bit more glow. I'm gonna let this sit into my skin. I'm going to enjoy some coffee and then I'm gonna come back and get started. The number one thing that I'm learning with my makeup application as I get older is that I need to apply my makeup in much thinner, lighter layers and pack on the coverage very pinpointed where I actually need it. These two brushes I would use for the same purpose of concealing and color correcting underneath my eyes. These have the same density, but if you were able to feel these brushes in person, you would feel the difference within the actual structural integrity of the brushes themselves. There is a different flexibility with the bristles within these brushes, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So this brush, for example, is a dense brush that offers low flexibility, meaning it's going to offer the most impact with the color payoff that it lays down on the skin. If you were to put this against the skin, you can see that this does have some give, but it's a little bit more stiff. The way that these are packed into the brush is more conducive for having the bristles stay tightly packed together so that they produce a more high impact effect on the skin. So I used to be able to use brushes like this all over my face to really pack on the coverage and particularly underneath my eyes to really get the most impact with my concealer. Nowadays, I'm using a brush that is equally dense but that is fluffier, that has more flexibility, more give, and more movement to it to not pack on so much pigment at one time off the bat onto my skin. This brush has just as many bristles as that other brush, but you can see it has much more give. The fibers are longer, which means that it is much gentler on the skin. So it's going to give me as much coverage as the smaller, densely packed brush is, but it's going to offer more flexibility so that I can really control how light of a touch this has on my skin to really just very gently lay down product. And I'm going to show you the difference with the color corrector that I'm going to use. This for me is now a new step in my routine that is a non-negotiable. Previously, I was able to just go in with concealer and I was able to get the coverage that I needed and it didn't really matter. Because I am now starting to experience some mild volume loss underneath my eyes, as I mentioned, this area is becoming much more dark because my skin is quite literally hollowing out even more, which is casting even more shadows and more darkness underneath my eyes. So the concealer alone isn't going to provide enough color correcting, enough light diffusion to counteract that darkness. That is where a color corrector comes into play for me now. If you've never used color corrector, I would highly suggest you finding a very affordable palette. I got this one at Ulta. This one has various color tones for different skin concerns that you might need to address. You can look up how to color correct online. It's very easy once you understand color theory and what you need to address with what color. So for my skin tone, I'm going to go in with this lighter peachier shade to counteract the bluish discoloration underneath my eyes, and because this one is closer to the actual depth of my skin right now. If I was self-tanned or if this was summertime, I would be going in with this darker peachy shade. But I'm going to demonstrate the importance of changing up your tools with this color corrector and the difference it makes with your makeup on each side of my face. I'm going to apply my makeup how I'm currently doing it on this side of my face and how I was previously doing it on this side of my face. So you can see the different results with application and technique. I'm going to go in with this densely packed, less flexible, shorter bristle brush on this side. So I'm just going to dip into this color corrector very gently and start to pick that up on the brush. When I apply color corrector, I like to look down so that I can really see where I need to target that discoloration. It gives you the best view of all of the darkness that you are dealing with underneath your eyes. And here is the darkest portion, and that is the area that I want to visually lift with the light. And I'm just going to very gently sort of tap this in. I'm not going to pull too much. This is very, very light tapping motions. I'm going to apply more than I normally am right now to show you how much of a difference the amount of product makes on your skin. I'm going to get the hollows of the eye right here because this region produces a lot of darkness and a lot of shadowing just naturally, and even more so now. I'm really going to get this outer corner because I'm experiencing a lot of darkness here. I'm going to pack this on underneath the eye right here. If I used to use color corrector, this is how I would have used it. I would have really packed it on and kind of just put it all over. I wouldn't have been as careful with it, and you would have seen just how stark it is on my skin. Whereas now, I'm taking a dense brush that has more give, more flexibility, longer bristles to control the actual lightness of the bristles against my skin. I'm lightly swirling this product onto the bristles of the brush. I'm actually going to swirl a little bit off the back of my hand because I don't want this to apply too pigmented under the eyes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very lightly feather this into the areas that need it most. So again, for me, it is going to be this tiny triangle right here that has the most extreme darkness. I'm just going to do very, very light swirling motions, and you're going to see that this will start to diminish that darkness here. Color correcting is one of those things where the less you put on, the better, because the more pigmented of a color correcting tone that you use, the more you have to color correct the color corrector because you can see it through the makeup. Doing this in very light layers, covering exactly what you need and nothing more, I have found produces the best result. All the videos that you see online of people really going in with all these crazy colored color correctors and doing a huge swatch, and it just doesn't look natural in real life, and realistically, you do not need that much product. I need a little bit additional on the outer corner right there because there is some discoloration, and I just want to kind of naturally lift and snatch the eye. So just a tiny bit there. Again, very light circular motions. I'm just buffing this in a tiny bit at a time. And I want to focus on this ridge right here because you see this is where my under eye skin starts, and this is where the rest of my skin starts. There is a stark line that you can see that produces a visual line of demarcation. I want to really address that, to lift that, to make it more seamless between the rest of my skin and my under eye skin. Very gently buff and try and diminish that line to make the transition between the two areas a little bit more seamless. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit more on my brush, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tap this on to preserve the coverage there in particular, because again, I want to produce a visual lifting of the eye. So just very, very gently tapping this into this region right here. So this is a color corrector on both eyes. Again, this side is how I used to do my makeup. This is how I'm doing my makeup now. You can see just how stark of a difference this produces. I still get the color correcting that I need. The under eyes are lifted on both sides, but here I'm gonna have to do a lot more work to cover all of this color corrector because it's more stark on my skin. Whereas this side, it kind of just blends into the skin. If I did just a light powdering of my face, I'd honestly be able to walk out the door and just not worry about it. And that's kind of the goal with color corrector. Now I'm ready to go in with my actual concealer. With concealer, it's going to be the same principle. I want to keep it very light on this side with how I'm currently doing it. I'm going to apply it more for coverage the way I used to do it on this other side. The tone of the concealer that I use now is more of a color correcting tone. So this is a little bit more peachy and undertone to kind of help counteract the darkness under my eyes a little bit further. On the side that I used to do it, I used to just literally take the concealer wand and slap it underneath my eyes as I needed it. For the way that I do my makeup now, I can't really do that because it just gets too creasy, it gets out of control, and it looks too heavy on the under eyes. So now what I do is I take the brush and I dip it into the product on the back of my hand first, and I really load it up. I get it really worked into the bristles, and I apply it the same way that I applied that color corrector. So this is a formulation that is very creamy, so I have enough playtime to literally let this sit on my skin and it'll be okay. We can still blend it out, but I just want to show you how I apply this now on this side. So again, we've taken it on our bristles right here. We've really loaded up that brush. And what I'm going to do is very lightly start to tap this into my under eyes. I'm going to concentrate this in the areas where I need it most. So again, I'm going to look down and I'm going to begin packing it very gently in that triangle of darkness that we just color corrected beforehand. I'm going to take it slightly into this inner portion of the eye because again, we experience a lot of darkness there naturally as well. And using a brush that is dense but has longer bristles and has some flexibility and give to it allows you to apply this in a much more controlled fashion in very light, thin, feathery layers. So you can really dial up the control as you need it to not get it too heavy or too thick on the skin where it's going to crease, emphasize texture, or gather in any fine lines and wrinkles. And to preserve the amount of coverage underneath the eyes, I'm not doing a swirling buffing motion as I was for the color corrector. Here, I want to preserve as much of the pigment of this product as I can, so this is where I'm going to be tapping. I avoid swiping underneath the eyes because this is a very delicate area and swiping is just going to produce brush marks. It can brush away the coverage and kind of undo the hard work that you're building up for. That looks really good so far. So now I'm going to switch back to this other brush and blend out the concealer on this side the way I used to do it. So like I said, I used to take it just directly from the concealer wand and put it right on my skin and then blend it out. And that works just as fine too if you have a formula that is conducive for that type of application. A lot of concealer formulas nowadays for more drier or mature skin can handle that, but even still, I prefer having much more individual control on certain areas of my face than just taking product directly from applicator to skin. I prefer to have things on the back of my hand and really buff the product and work it into my brush to produce a much more seamless, light, airy effect. You can see already this is looking pretty overloaded, and I have a natural wrinkle right here. And that I can tell you is already starting to gather some product in it because of the way that I'm applying this. There's a lot of this still on my brush because again, this is a very densely packed, very tightly bound brush. It's not going to soak up much of the product. So you're really going to get as much product pigmentation on your skin because of that. So I've got a lot of leftover product on here that I now need to work into the rest of my face, which is fine, but it's going to produce a little bit of a heavier layer on my skin, which isn't going to produce the best effect as we go on. So I'm going to really just work this into my skin here. Again, really working this into this inner corner for that darkness there. I've covered up this area here where it is the darkest. I still need to do a little bit more blending because again, there's a ton of product here still. This is a concealer applied on both eyes right now. From eye to eye, you can see the difference in the application, the heaviness of this, and just the overall pigmentation of this. This side did a good job of hiding a lot of that discoloration, but visually it just looks heavier. I'm already starting to get some creasing on my eyelids. It's starting to kind of collect in the fine lines and folds that I have up there. You can see that right here. In here, it's already starting to separate underneath the eye where I have a couple natural wrinkles right there. And it's just going to get worse and worse over time because there is so much product overloaded on my skin. As opposed to taking a look at the concealer on this side. I applied this in a very light, thin, feathery layer, and I do have just as many under eye wrinkles on this side as I do over here, but you don't see the product collecting or separating from those wrinkles the way that it is on this side. It's not creasing on my eyelids, and I did apply some up there. And overall, this effect just looks more skin-like. It's going to blend easier with the rest of my makeup, and this side is just going to take a little bit more work to make this more seamless. It's not impossible, but it's just going to take a little bit more extra blending and care. So that is just an example of the types of tools that you need to change up using for specific parts of your makeup routine. The areas where you want to pack on the most coverage are going to be more pinpointed areas as you get older. It's not going to be as spread across the face. Again, working in thinner, lighter, more feathery layers is going to work best. And if you have specific areas of concern like discoloration, melasma, pigmentation, you're going to take brushes that are much finer and very dense to do very concentrated work, which is what we're going to work on next. So as you can see, I do have some areas of discoloration on my face from very old acne scarring that I'm actively working on through chemical peels and other means. I'm specifically using tretinoin right now, so I'm going through skin purging where my skin is breaking out as it's being cleaned and cleared out. So I have a nice red blemish down here that we are going to color correct and conceal the same way that we did. So I'm going to take my color correcting little palette here, and now I'm going to go into the bottom layer and work with this green. Green neutralizes red-based discoloration. Again, it works on color theory. You can look up how color theory works for color correction specifically. I'm going to take a very dense, very pinpointed, very tiny brush. Shorter bristles, there's a lot of bristles tightly packed in here. There is not a lot of give with this brush. There's not a lot of wispiness or flexibility. It doesn't look as airy as something like this, for example. This is exactly what you need for pinpointed coverage as you age with your makeup. So I'm going to take this brush and I'm going to very gently dip into this green color corrector. Green is a hue that is going to show through your makeup, so work in thinner, lighter layers. I'm going to take this and honestly blend a little bit on the back of my hand and really work it into the brush to not overload my skin. I only need enough color corrector to neutralize. I don't need to go overboard. I'm going to start off with very light tapping motions to start to deposit this product onto this discolored acne spot right here. And you can see the green coming through. It is a little bit more visible on my skin. It's green, but the redness is also slightly disappearing. I don't need to cover it entirely because concealer is going to do the rest of that. I just need to take down the brightness of that red. So you can see the line of demarcation where the color corrector is. I'm now going to take this same brush and I'm going to continue blending it, but I'm going to take the excess product that's on here and just rub it off the back of my hand because I don't want to apply any more of it. All I want to do now with no additional product on my brush is basically blend out the edges of this green circle that you see here to feather it into the rest of my skin tone to make the transition between the color corrector and the rest of my skin more seamless so that I don't have to do any additional work trying to cover up that green because it's already applied in such a thin, light layer. The other thing that I want to take note of is that because this is an active acne spot that is drying up and healing, it is a little bit more dry and textured than the rest of the skin. Makeup is not going to hide texture, so you do need to be aware of that and make sure that you're accounting for that when you're doing your makeup and applying your products. So because this is a little bit dry and crusty, I don't want that to be too obvious against the rest of my makeup as I continue. So I'm going to take the Too Faced Refresh and Setting Spray to rehydrate that little spot. I'm just going to spray a little bit on my finger and just tap it over that spot to rehydrate the blemish, to take down the crustiness, if you will, and it'll take away some of that color correction coverage, but that's okay because we can go back in with a little bit more of the color corrector and just go right on top of it as we were. So I'm just going to take a tiny dab. That's all you need. And I will just go right on top and recover it. And there we go. That is recovered. It's looking fine. It's looking a little bit better now that it's not as dry and textured. Okay, so I'm going to cover up this other little red spot right there. Again, that is an old acne scar from years ago that I am working to address with some things that I'm doing. So very lightly tap some color corrector into my brush. Gonna tap a little bit of that excess off my skin. Just start to very gently tap that over those regions. I'm not trying to work any miracles. All I'm trying to do is take down the brightness of the red that is in these areas so that it doesn't show through as much with the rest of my makeup. Just blending out the very edges of where I applied that color corrector to make it more seamless with the rest of my skin. You can see the tone of where that color corrector is barely different than the actual depth of my skin. That is something to consider. Color corrector should be an application situation, a color situation where you choose the right depth of the tone of the color corrector and you apply it softly enough where it really kind of just blends into the rest of your skin. It shouldn't stand out in any way, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate on this other side. I didn't really used to color correct beforehand, but if I did, I'm sure it would be something like this. I'd go in directly from the pan and right onto my skin without brushing this off on the back of my hand and working it into my skin to warm up the product and thin it out. I would probably just go right into it. This is applied to the more pinpointed areas. I do have some redness here that I want to diminish a little bit, so I'm going to switch to this brush and kind of dip into that and really load it up on there. This, again, picks up a lot more product and deposits a lot more at one time, and I'd probably just honestly stipple this on to take a lot of that down. And because I'm going in more intense, it just means that I'm going to have to work harder to get this to blend in once I have my foundation on. And there's nothing really wrong with it as long as your skin can handle it and you're using products that are conducive to doing so. It's just not how I would do my makeup at this stage in life. So this side compared to this side. There's one key point that I want to bring to your attention at this stage because this is a really good demonstration of why the level of product that you apply to your skin and how you apply it is important. I want you to take a really close look at my under eyes right now. I have been sitting with this color corrector and this very light concealer on both of my eyes for about 20 minutes right now. Look at how this side looks. This area where I have this natural wrinkle underneath my eye, it looks like the concealer is literally running away from the wrinkle on either side, and in the actual wrinkle itself, all of that product has collected. There is a lot of texture in this region that is now happening. I'm starting to have some patchiness with the actual coverage of the product, so it looks like this area is more covered than this area is because it's really starting to separate. Even over here, that darkness is now coming through. This crow's feet area is looking more textured than it was before. My eyelids are looking very bad at this point because the product is gathering in the natural folds of my eyelids. and it's just not looking as flattering as it could, as opposed to this side, which has been sitting just as long. Very thin, light layers, only covering what we needed to. I still am getting a tiny bit of separation increasing in the natural wrinkles that I have on this side, but do you see how much less severe it is between both eyes? I'm still maintaining a decent amount of coverage. I am losing a tiny bit here, but keep in mind that we did not set either side with powder yet at all, which is something to consider. But at this stage, you can see how much less severe the creasing, the texture, and just the overall unevenness is with this side. This is still looking quite stark, and this, even after a while of sitting with not setting with anything on either side, just looks so much more skin-like, much more seamless. I could literally just tap this back in, and that would instantly go away and fix the issue. No harm, no foul. Whereas this side, if I tap that back in, it will help to kind of correct and re-even everything out. But the key difference here is that this is going to continue to happen all day, no matter what I do, even if I set it, which is the biggest difference when it comes to product application on your skin as you get older. The heavier, the more pronounced the product is on your skin, the harder you're going to have to fight with it throughout the day to keep it looking fresh and looking good. I'm gonna go in and just finish tapping this region out. I'm going to redistribute that product from my eye wrinkles down here. Give this a blend both on the bottom and on the top of my eyelid, because we're now going to set this with a little bit of powder. This side, I'm literally just gonna very gently tap this back into place. I don't really need much at all. Tapping that back in there. We're gonna move on to setting what we've just done with our color corrector and our concealer before we move on to the rest of it. Powders are a point of contention and something that you're going to need to take note of as you get older and do your makeup, because the formulation of the powder is really going to matter, and it's really going to make or break the difference the way that your makeup looks on your skin. It's either going to produce oatmeal on your skin or make your skin look flawless, and I'll show you what I mean. I used to just go in with a straight foundation powder pretty lightly underneath my eyes to set my concealer, which is a great option if you want a little bit of additional coverage underneath your eyes and for setting the concealer. But again, if you're going in with too heavy of a hand or too dense and thick of a brush, it can produce the opposite effect. I'm going to go in with that same concealer brush that I've been using and dip into this foundation powder. This is not as finely milled as something like a dedicated setting powder or a finishing powder. I'm going to show you what I mean. It's more pigmented, it is denser, it is heavier, it is not as fine as something like a true setting powder or a finishing powder, which I'll show you in a second. This is meant to cover. This is not necessarily meant to set the skin down in any way. You can use this very strategically to amp up coverage where you need it. But if I was using this in my 20s, this is exactly how I would use it. I'd be taking it on a brush just like this because, again, at that point, my skin can handle it. Very lightly dipped in, I'm now going to start to press this underneath the eyes. And you can see, even in just that time between re-tapping that product into my skin, it's already creasing and separating and looking crusty again. I'm going to re-tap this into my skin one more time because we do not want to press powder into that, because that will basically lock it in like cement. We want to make sure it is as flawless underneath our eyes as we possibly can before we go in with powder, because once you set it with powder, that is going to stay like that. Now I'm going to take the brush and I'm going to lightly tap this powder into those areas to lock down the concealer. So what this is basically doing is taking this from a more hydrating wet state where it is mobile and movable, and making it a little bit more permanent so that it doesn't shift and move around on the skin, particularly in this region. We did a lot of hard work to build up this coverage. I don't want it to go anywhere. I don't want it to get slippy and slidey and stay too tacky or wet in this region, because I want to hide the discoloration. Really focusing it on this region in particular, because this is the area where it moves the most, because there is a mobile lid space right here. That has taken down some of that shine. We've locked in that powder so it's not going anywhere. That product isn't going to slip. We're going to maintain that coverage, but we're going to keep an eye on that as we go along. For the other eye, now I'm using something that is more airy, more finely milled, more dust-like in its actual nature. This is the NYX HD Studio Finishing Powder. This powder is very finely milled, which means that it's just ground up to a very, very fine, wispy, airy powder. As I'm speaking to you, this is actually dusting off in the air. This is perfect for the skin when you get older because it's not going to settle into fine lines and wrinkles. It's really going to create a flawless sort of blurred canvas effect. I'm going to take what's left in the lid because that is plenty of product, and I'm going to take the same brush that we've been using for this demonstration this whole time. So I just want to double check, make sure that there is no creases happening. Again, really nothing going on. I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe just a tiny bit up here. And that's really all we need. I'm going to dip into this brush. I'm really going to load it up, and I'm really going to work some of this powder into the brush. I really want to prep my brush and get it nice and loaded. I'm going to begin in the area where I want to maintain the most coverage, which again for me is this triangle right here where we focused on before with color correcting and concealing. And I am going to very lightly tap this in into the entire eye area. And this is just going to lock in all of that hard work that we did. And it's going to help us maintain all of that coverage. It's going to keep it from slipping and sliding. But because this powder is so fine and so airy and wispy in nature, you're still going to get a lot of that hydration and glow that comes through. Do you see how nicely blurred and almost flawless of an effect that produces over here, as opposed to this eye where things are just looking a little bit suspect, a little bit crusty, if you will. You can choose to use a more finely milled finishing sort of setting powder that has pigment to it to increase the coverage that you want in specific areas. You can totally do that. Maybelline Fit Me powder has a fantastic loose powder that does just that. What matters more so is the texture and consistency of the powder. You're going to want to look for something that is very fine, very, very, very well pulverized to the point where it kind of looks like dust floating in the air and it's like going to disappear on you entirely. Whether it's translucent or colored, that is completely up to your choosing. I'm going to now just lightly set that color corrector because again, I don't necessarily want that to go anywhere either. And I really want to focus on blending out these edges to make it more of a seamless transition as we go in with our foundation, to start toning that down and getting rid of some of the severity of the green on this side. You can see that's looking a little less green over here. I'm gonna blend it some more down here so it looks a little better. On the other side, I'm going to go in with that NYX HD finishing powder. Do the same thing, just very lightly tap into here because I used what was on the cap already. Work it into the cap and just lightly tap it into this area that I ever so slightly color corrected, and a little bit down here as well. It's going to keep it from moving too much and maintain the pigmentation of that color corrector on the areas of concern. Before I go in with my foundation, after I've color corrected, I've concealed, I've set down those two products, I like to take another spray of my Hangover RX refreshing spray to refresh everything at this point.